here comes the reason you clicked on this video, guys. So, how much did you actually make as an engineer in San Francisco? Hello， 大家好，我是克雷儿，欢迎回到我的频道。今天呢，我为大家重金礼聘请来一位美国人的前矽谷工程师，为大家分享他在矽谷工作真实1年到底赚多少钱，以及他在那边真实生活跟工作的经验。最后呢，我也会问他一个大家都很关心的问题，就是他现在身为一个小新创公司的负责人，他到底对没有美国学历的外国人是什么想法？会不会考虑雇佣他们呢？那所以记得看到影片的最后，让我们直接请来宾进场。So Alex meet the people, people meet Alex. Thanks for being here with me today. Do you want to briefly introduce yourself in Chinese?
你好，我的名字是亚历山德，我是美国人，现在我住在台湾。我非常喜欢台湾人跟台湾食物，小笼包跟饺子。谢谢。
Thank you. So today I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about like your experience being a software engineer in San Francisco. And from my experience working with you, you're amazing, very professional at what you do. So I think you're in a very great position to share your experience with the people. But this all started from zero. Like you didn't study in computer science and stuff. So first of all, I'm sure they're most curious about what is the one thing you like the most about being in Taiwan?
The food is easily the best. It's so cheap, it's so delicious.
Okay, so real question. You studied business instead of computer science in college at Babson. So how did you start your career as a software engineer, or how did you come about that decision?
It started when I was in high school. I learned how to code because I really like video games, and I was creating a video game with my brother. And from there, I started to learn a lot more coding. I started venturing into mobile app development, and I'm a self-taught coder, so I looked up tons of resources online, tons of articles, forums to help get some help and learn. I never actually purchased any books or did any online courses. I like to follow tutorials, like written tutorials. And at the time, there weren't quite as many resources for learning coding online as there are now. It did take quite a bit of time and effort, but I stuck with it and I kept creating more things and new projects. That led me to a point where out of college, I got my first job as a software engineer because I was able to develop mobile apps, and they actually hired me to develop apps for the iPhone, but I actually had not developed apps for the iPhone before. I did mostly for the Windows Phone, if anyone remembers that. It's kind of how it all started, just showing that I knew what I was doing when I was talking to them and showing them the work that I've done. That gave them a lot of confidence that I was fit for the job.
That's awesome. So you basically just taught yourself everything. That brings us to the next question I wanted to ask you. As someone who didn't study in computer science, what was the most difficult part about going through the interview process when you were trying to land your first job?
One of the hardest parts is the trick coding questions that they give you. So they will ask you to do things that you would learn in a computer science curriculum that are very theoretical but aren't really that practical. So what is the performance of this algorithm using big O notation? I didn't really know what that was at all. I just knew what was performant and what wasn't. I didn't know there was a way to classify performance. So a lot of the jargon, a lot of the theories that you learn in computer science, I just didn't know. I didn't know a lot of the language too. So getting to learn how to talk about coding was actually something I had to learn, and took quite a while. That was a little difficult, especially going through those interviews.
Okay. Well, speaking of like talking about coding and stuff, how important it is, in your opinion, to be able to speak fluent English in terms of landing a job and succeeding at work? Because I know a lot of people watching this video, they probably don't speak perfect English.
Well, of course, in the United States, it does matter. Most people there speak English, so it was very important, not only in getting the interviews and communicating my skills and my knowledge, and convincing them that I was the right employee to hire, but also that when you're talking with teammates and collaborating, it's really important to have that communication. Plus, most programming languages and most editors and all are in English, so even if it doesn't matter too much that you know English when you're actually in the act of coding. Understanding what these abbreviations mean and these other things mean with the English is really helpful.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like communication is like really important in terms of like collaborating with others and stuff. So have you come across other international engineers when you were at work, and what was your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I've worked with many. They are brilliant. They're awesome. A lot from many different countries: Peru, India, parts of Europe, parts of Asia, like kind of everywhere. They're all great. Some people are, of course, going to be good. Some people are going to be not so good at their job. I didn't see English as a barrier. They all spoke very well English.
That's like a good news to them. I've heard that sometimes it takes up to a year or two to land a job as an engineer. Do you think that's like very common there, or is it just like individual cases?
It depends on where you're coming from. If it's your first job out of college, then it might take a year or two because it's very competitive in Silicon Valley. Like very, very competitive. How long did it take you? It took me about 6 to 8 months of like searching, and then finally I got a referral into a company through a friend, which got me in. And once you're in Silicon Valley, it's much easier to find a job because they look for people at companies in Silicon Valley because they kind of understand the culture and how things work. Though if you're just coming out of college, no professional experience, or you don't have a portfolio, that's going to be tough. If you're coming out of a boot camp and you have a support system in place to help you, that will definitely help quite a bit. But the biggest thing is having a portfolio, showing you know what you can do, or showing you can do what you claim you can do. That's a really big plus. Even as someone who looks for engineers, that's what I look for the most, the experience.
So have a portfolio, have a way for people to discover what you can actually do. That's really important. So another question I have for you is that you didn't start off in San Francisco. You started your first job in New Hampshire after you graduated from college, and I was wondering, have you always wanted to move to San Francisco? How did that come about?
I've always wanted to move to the West Coast, California. I've always heard of Silicon Valley being the hub of tech and entrepreneurship, and those are two things I really love, tech and entrepreneurship. So I wanted to move there. I had lived on the East Coast my whole life, so New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and I wanted to experience a different culture, a different way of thinking. Even though it's still in the United States, it's still a very different place. I thought in order to grow, I had to get out of my comfort zone and go somewhere very different from where I was living, and it was a wonderful decision.
Awesome. And can you walk us through a day of you working as an engineer in San Francisco?
Great question. So every day is usually pretty different. And I worked for an early stage startup. Some days I can just be fixing bugs. Other days I would be building new features. But my day would be, I'm an early bird, so I wake up around 5 a.m. I go to the gym, and then I get ready for work. I also had a side project at the time, so I would probably do a little bit of work before I go to work. Then I'd head over to work. We would spend, in the first hour or so, I would spend catching up on my tasks, catching up on my work. And then we would have a stand-up. So everyone on the team, you might be familiar with a stand-up in Scrum. Everyone on your immediate team goes through what they're working on, what are the blockers, and so you have an overall understanding of what's going on in the team, who's working on what. And then I would take a look at my task list, which my product manager created for me, and I would go through that. What is the highest priority? What's lowest priority? Spend a few hours coding. In the early days of my employment at the company, we were interviewing a lot, so I would spend maybe at least a half hour, an hour each day interviewing different candidates to join the team. But if in the later stages when we had a lot of hires, we would spend a few hours coding, then they would bring lunch, they would cater lunch to the office so you didn't have to go out and buy it. And then after that, spend more hours of the afternoon coding. The engineering team really loved boba, so we would actually go get boba for the whole team, and then have a little team bonding event with the boba for 15 minutes or so, and then just continue working through most of the day. And then I'd leave probably around 4 p.m. Most of the team members came in at 10 a.m. and left at 6 p.m., which is not unusual for San Francisco in California. It's a very, very relaxed atmosphere.
And speaking of that, how was the work-life balance there? Did you or your coworker have to work overtime?
Yeah, the work-life balance was good. I'm a believer that work-life balance is on you as an individual to manage. You have demands for your job, but it's on you to push back and make sure that you're creating that balance that's manageable and sustainable over time. But my employment was very flexible. Even if I came in at like 11 a.m., it was fine as long as I told them, why I was coming in. This is the culture of the company. But there were definitely days I had to stay late if we were fixing a bug or something that's very important. Or if you're on call, you have to keep your phone on all the time. You get woken up in the middle of the night. That's definitely happened to me to fix some bugs or some issue that happened. But there was also times where I stayed late just because I was actually really enjoying my work and I was having fun. I'm like, I don't want to stop. I want to just keep doing this.
Were you able to get paid if you were to work overtime?
No, we were on salary, so that's a benefit and a con. You work overtime with no extra pay, but you can also work less and get the same pay.
Another thing I was curious about was that what was something very surprising for you after you moved to San Francisco?
People in Silicon Valley could have an ego. So if you are in Silicon Valley software engineer, that's kind of like where all software engineers want to be. And so you're in this awesome location, usually getting paid quite a lot of money. And for many people that does create a sense of an ego. So there are these engineers who think they're, the smartest people and who are the brightest and they can solve the world's problems through coding. Not that some of those things aren't true, but that's not what I was looking for in a company. And that's why I really liked the company I worked at, because everyone there was very nice, down to earth. They understood that collaborating and thoughtfully thinking through how do you solve these problems and what kind of problems do you solve, how do you prioritize them was really important. And they were just overall great people to collaborate with. They weren't those coders who would just sit at their desk and code everything and not talk to anyone.
Awesome. Okay. So how much was your monthly expense when you were in New Hampshire and when you were in San Francisco? Because Alex's first job was in New Hampshire and that was not that expensive to live there. And then when he moved to San Francisco, it was a completely different situation. So can you talk about both of the places and what was the pros and cons of them?
Yeah, so New Hampshire, one of the pros, it is very cheap. There is no sales tax in the state, no state income tax. My rent was really cheap. It was a little over $500 a month.
15,000 NT.
I had my own private room. I lived with 2 other people. It was a big space and it was a great location. That was a wonderful deal and I really, really enjoyed it. Food was generally cheaper, not as much as Taiwan, but definitely more than other parts of the US.
Nowhere compared to Taiwan.
Nowhere compared to Taiwan. California is a very different story. San Francisco, I was in a very a higher end apartment. I was paying $2,500 a month for my rent.
5 times more. Were you making 5 times more?
I wasn't making 5 times.
So it wasn't worth it.
Sometimes worth it. It was increasing my living expenses a lot more than my income. In California, things were generally a lot more expensive. Even basic Italian food was more expensive. You had the state income tax, which is very high. Sales tax in California is probably the highest in the United States. And on top of that, San Francisco has an income tax. The city of San Francisco has a 1% income tax. So that's just extra money out of your paycheck. Despite that, I really enjoyed my time and I still made quite a bit of money.
So how much were you able to save when you were working in San Francisco and how much were you able to save when you were back in New Hampshire?
In New Hampshire, I was able to save $1,500 to $2,000 a month. In San Francisco, I was saving probably $2,500 or $3,000 a month. So even
overall, you still saved more,
yes,
despite the rent.
Yes.
Oh.
I think considering that I didn't have student loans then too.
Oh, I
So,
see.
yeah.
Okay. So here comes the reason you clicked on this video, guys. So how much did you actually make as an engineer in San Francisco?
So I was a mid-level engineer, with just 2, 3, 4 years of experience in the industry. At my peak as a senior software engineer, I was making $150,000 US a year.
4,500,000 NT
per year. My starting salary was $110,000. Almost 3 years, that went up to $150,000.
Does that include all the bonuses and stock options and stuff?
No, that's just my base salary. I had stock options. Engineers don't really get bonuses, but yeah, it was the $150,000. You got other perks like you got the free lunch, you got health insurance, you got all these other perks that are worth much more than that too.
Now you know, guys. And here comes the final question is a bonus question. I'm asking this for a lot of aspiring Taiwanese engineers because a lot of them, they hold like a degree in Taiwan, but they're thinking about whether they should study there first or like start working there somehow, like get a job. So as someone who runs like your own startup right now, do you care if they only have an international degree and not having like an American degree, or you wouldn't care?
It wouldn't matter to me. One of the great things about software engineering now is that you don't even need to have a degree to become a professional in the field. There's no certification, no sorts of credentials that you need to get into the industry. And for me, it's most important that people have experience doing things. So what projects have you worked on? Have you worked on a project that's kind of similar to what we want you to do? Have you demonstrated success in your projects? Like, how is your coding? That's what I look for, and that's what a lot of employers look for. I know Google recently said they're not looking for degrees anymore. They don't care if you have a degree or not.
Yeah.
But for me personally, it's do you have that real practical experience building things and doing things that we need you to do?
Okay, awesome. Good news for you guys. Okay, so this is the real last question. Okay, what is the best piece of advice you would give to like an aspiring engineer?
Build your portfolio. You need a lot of projects and experience to show you can do it. With so much competition now in software, you're going to stand out by showing you've done it and you've done things that employers will be looking for.
Thank you for being here with us today. I'm sure you guys learned a lot from Alex. If you want him to talk more about other topics, you can comment down below so he'll know, and give this video a thumbs up because he'll be counting the likes every night from now on. He'll actually do it. So yeah, see you guys next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.